Geocachomaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Well, welcome to GeoGearHeads. This is episode 364. This is a weekly show about geocaching and geolocation services. And tonight we are doing our second show on benchmarking. Now, I'm Chris of the Northwest, along with our host, Daryl W4. Daryl, how are you doing this evening?
Not bad. It is a kind of foggy night, and I don't just mean outside, though.
He's a little foggy on the inside as well.
I am. Yeah, the fog has settled into my brain after a very, very long couple of months, and I'm looking forward to the holiday break.
You're looking forward to a long winter's nap?
Yeah, we'll go with that instead.
Yeah. Do you have a kerchief?
No.
Okay.
I'll have to get one of those.
You'll have to for your long winter's nap. But we are not alone this evening. We've got an incredible guest. Tonight we have MD Surveyor. MD Surveyor, thank you so much for joining us on the GeoGearHeads. Hello, MD Surveyor.
We've lost him for a moment.
He might have a little stage fright.
Yeah, I think his connection dropped.
That causes people to freeze, right? When you announce it.
Yeah, the stage fright of a different type. We scared away his internet connection.
I've been known to scare away things quite like that. Yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, the last time we talked about benchmarking was almost 2 years ago. Wow. On 190, which kind of took me by surprise. And there has been a lot that's changed since that last show. One of the things that we were commenting on before the show is that we lost the links on the geocaching.com website. And I think the last time we were in the same case, he actually just texted me that the laptop crashed, so he's rebooting. So we'll have him back shortly. However,
as can happen. And I'll just let people know, I've already talked to Daryl about it, but we've got high winds and rain in my area. There's been power out throughout the area. My house has not lost power, but the night's still young, folks. It's a blustery night out there. It's too windy to have dense fog.
Right. Which is all that I have, both inside and out.
And apparently it's just windy here, inside and out.
Oh,
is that just
thank goodness for that mute switch?
Oh, wait, not that kind of wind. Well, maybe it should be. I don't
know. But getting back to the locating them, geocaching.com has their own database, and for a lot of the old challenges and some of the games, that kind of stuff, you'd have to find benchmarks. So they are still on geocaching.com. I haven't found one in more than 8 years, though. I think you've actually found one a little more recently than I have.
No, it's been much longer than 8 years. For me, it's been 13 years.
Oh.
So it was not too soon, not too shortly after I found geocaching, maybe 3 years, that I went and got my first benchmark, it's relatively close to me. I found a couple of them. And I found benchmarks harder to find than geocaches. Geocaches, you're looking for a container that's hidden and you've kind of got that geosense. Well, benchmarks don't necessarily follow that geosense.
No, and they're not always where they're reported to be. You've got some of them that have been destroyed because they built a road or something over them. And that was actually my first attempt to find one. Was it had been paved over, and it actually says in the notes that it was destroyed.
The first one I found was eye level on a building, and you would think that would just jump out at you. However, I'm looking down thinking it's going to be in the middle of the sidewalk, and it didn't work that way. And I turn around, what's that right there on the building? So
Well, and keepers of the cash flow said that they've looked for benchmarks, and most of the ones they found have been right near caches, and that does happen on a fairly regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I shouldn't say fairly regular, but yeah, most of the people I know who are finding benchmarks is because they're right near a cache that they're finding, and in the process, they're trying to get the benchmark to satisfy some other requirement.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be a lot of fun. Where we were going with that initial comment about it's no longer easy to get to the benchmarking on geocaching.com is really the only way to get there is through the web browser, just pointing it directly to geocaching.com/mark, and that will get you to the benchmarking homepage, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still go to the cache page,
Any cache page
on the website, not from the apps, but on the website, and hit the find nearby benchmarks. So that will take you to the benchmarks that are right around you.
And so I found one near me and clicked on it, and there was an navigation. Use this in the geocaching.com map. So I clicked on the geocaching.com map, and oddly enough, it centered on where the benchmark is with no icon for the benchmark, right? Because there isn't one on the geocaching map, but it did center the map there, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. But the benchmarks are fun to go hunt for because it is a totally different experience, and you do have to kind of keep an eye on what some of those notes were. John in the chat says that the last benchmark he found was June of this year, and he's found 43. I've only found 5.
I think I found 2 or 3. Once I realized the first one counts towards your smiley count, but the second one and on up don't, was like, oh, well, that kind of took a lot of the wind out of my sails. Speaking of wind.
Sure.
Took the wind out of my sails for finding them.
And you don't have a way to prove that you were there short of just taking a photo and posting the photo of the actual benchmark.
Well, don't you have to put in a number or something from the benchmark?
No, because not all of them have the number. You have to have the number to log it, but the number's like the cache code. It's just there.
Let's see. I'm looking at one I found. Oh, there it is. Log this benchmark. Right. Yeah, you're right.
So it's kind of like a virtual.
A bit, yeah. That there's no fixed information to be found. It's like a geocache. There's no fixed information there to be found.
Sure, yeah. And this is only one of the places that you have to do it, but this is one that most geocachers have done. But MD Surveyor, you were mentioning as we were talking earlier in the week that there's another web database that is available for people to find and log the benchmarks.
Yeah, most of geocachers, when they find a benchmark, they'll put it on a geocaching.com website. But those marks are actually from the National Geodetic Survey, or NGS database. That database was copied by geocaching.com back in 2000 to create that database. But you can go to the NGS database and record it there as well. And the people I know from NGS really encourage that. Matter of fact, there's one guy goes by Dave D, D-A-V-E-D, that you'll see him respond on some of the forums for benchmarking a lot. He actually goes to the geocaching website for benchmarks and steals pictures of the benchmarks and puts them on the NGS website, so they actually have photographs, because the NGS website does allow now that you put photographs there, as well as your recovery information that you found it. And there's an app that I think we mentioned last time that was here, DS World, DSWORLD, standing for Datasheet World. That app, if you just Google that, it's a free it's for PC. It's not on a phone, not just used on a smartphone, but that's a user-friendly program to submit recoveries to the National Geodetic Survey website.
Yeah, and we did actually mention a couple of apps last time, but since then, I think all of those apps have died and aren't supported anymore. So there really isn't an easy way to find them from a phone like you do with geocaches.
Well, I think there's the one that's called, now I have an Android, so I can't speak too much for what the Apple products are, but I did look before this session, and there's one called Benchmark and one called Point Serve, SURV, that both of those appear to allow you to bring up or it accesses the NGS database and bring it up on your phone using your location to see what's around you.
But they do or do not let you log your recoveries. Recoveries.
No, I don't think you can log recoveries. No, that's just to show you what's in the area, what's there. And then you can pull up, I guess you can pull up the data sheet from the ones I've seen that you can read the data sheet to see. And the data sheet is just basically the National Geodetic Survey form that the recoveries would get populated on. But that data sheet will tell you when the last recovery was and give you access to the photos. The link for the photos would be on that data sheet as well.
Well, at least there's a couple of them that are still active. When I had looked at the ones that we talked about last time, more than a year ago, I think both of them had been discontinued. And for iOS, those older apps just won't even work with the phone. So there might be some out there, but I haven't really found anything since those two went fallow.
Yeah, there is. I'm not sure how well it would work on a smartphone, but the National Geodetic Survey.
I think we might have lost him again. Maybe it's the winds and rains have blown away his. PC.
It could be the winds are so strong that here that it's disrupting his connection there.
It could be.
Yeah.
Perhaps there's a issue with the Wi-Fi's being blown away.
Ooh, the Wi-Fi's. Daryl, I was looking at some of these benchmarks, and some of them, not all of them, have a type of description, a bit like a come on, I'll think of it. You got the stamp in a book. It's a
letterboxing.
Letterbox. Thank you. See, I knew what I wanted to say. I just didn't know how to say it. I might be in a fog as well. So the one I looked up, there's a couple of them. One has a good description. This one says, this was in 1965 described by Coast and Geodetic Survey. The station was plotted and the area is bare of buildings except for one small concrete structure. Part of the area is used for parking. There is no stack at this present time. So that kind of information is not going to help you find the benchmark. However, one not too far away was done in 73, described by the National Geodetic Survey in 73, at Tacoma, 0.35 miles along the Burlington Northern Railroad from the crossing of McCarver Street, at the crossing of a power line in the top northeast corner or northeast concrete curb of an abandoned Bayside Drive, 21 feet northwest of the extended center line of the road through gate number 1, 67 feet northwest of a power pole, 43 feet southwest of the Southwest Rail, I mean, you look at that, you go, well, you could really triangulate very well exactly where this benchmark is.
Well, and what we haven't talked about yet is what benchmarks really are. And they're survey markers. Benchmarkers really tend to be something else in most other countries, but they're also referred to throughout much of the world as trig points.
Or brass caps, or I'm trying to think of some of the other countries.
So the benchmarks as we know them, the trig points, are these little survey markers that have been dropped into usually pavements. Sometimes they're just in dirt, grass, whatever, but they're fixed points that have been put there so people can go out there and triangulate old school where they are on the planet.
Exactly. And they're cut into a wall or pillar or building and used as a reference point in measuring altitudes is really what they were put out there for at first.
Well, and also you'll find some of these that are towers.
Mm-hmm.
We actually have some, I think they call them base marks, but I don't think that's quite the right name for it out here. And hopefully MD Surveyor will be back before too long. But yeah, he's having issues with his laptop as well. But the towers were points that the surveyors could actually use for from a little further distance without necessarily, I believe, the other person basically standing there. And I can't remember for the life of me right now what that's called.
Well,
Boy,
I see a survey crew goes out there with their.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to remember is what you have the transit and what's the target called? I can't remember for the life of me. Help, MD Surveyor, please.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I'm looking on Wikipedia, just, fleshing out some details here. Triangulation points, also known as trig points, are marks with a precisely established horizontal position. These points may be marked by discs similar to benchmark discs, but also set horizontally and sometimes used as elevation benchmarks. Prominent features of buildings, such as the tip of a church spire or a chimney stack, are also used as reference points for triangulation. So,
and Bounce in the chat is wondering why you would want to do a benchmark or find a benchmark. And it's really just a different type of hide and go seek kind of thing. These are at very specific locations. The ones that are registered on geocaching.com are the ones from the NGS, so they should be right where they say they are. Now, finding them might take a little bit of work because they're not always necessarily still there. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, the first one I tried to find had been destroyed because they put a road over where it had been.
Mm-hmm. And, I can share my screen if you want to. I've got some pictures here.
Yeah, let's go and do that while MD Surveyor gets back online here.
This is a typical benchmark in the U.S.
Which looks so familiar.
Yes, it's done by the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey. Let's see. This one was established in 1947.
Now, one of the interesting things about it is we have similar benchmarks around here that are part of the international border. And those describe in like this area, so many feet in this direction is where the international border is. So their border is in the water. They can't put a benchmark in the water. So they have to put these marks along the shore and indicate where they are. But those are not actually in the NGS database. However, they're very frequently near the ones that are.
Exactly. So yeah, it's a lot of different things. Now, there could be benchmarks that are not physical marks. I'm looking at one that is a church spire. And so there's no physical disc there. They're actually using the church spire as the benchmark.
Right.
So, go ahead.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, we seem to have lost the microphone. No, the headset seems to be gone, but go ahead. We were talking about the actual tools that the surveyors use, and I remember the transit, but what's the target called?
What they will be sighting with the instrument?
Yes.
That would be, it's usually a prism. It's just like a piece of glass that they're sighting. So most of the instruments now send out an electronic beam. So that would just go out, it would hit the prism and come back.
Well, that's what they'd actually stick on the benchmark to triangulate the position.
Right. So if you see, and I apologize for
I've actually switched computers now, so hopefully this one is a little more stable. But so not knowing all of your conversation, but usually when they're sighting, there is a prism that's on top of it. It could be a single pole that the surveyor is holding, or it could be set up on a tripod that's, that would keep it a little more stable. But yes, that's what they use to, if they're using what we call now conventional surveying equipment, line of sight optical things, because we do use GPS a lot now as well to get positions. And as long that doesn't need to see between each other, but they need to see the sky because they need to see the satellites.
Very true. Now, what are they looking for? What information are they gathering from these points?
All you're really doing is there are the benchmarks that the show's about, that we're talking about. The National Geodetic Survey does publish elevations and latitudes and longitudes for these, and there are different types. There's all different types of these discs. They don't all have latitudes and longitudes. They don't all have elevations. The different discs serve different purposes. But what you're doing when you're measuring with the either the optical instruments, or you would call more the conventional surveying versus GPS, is you're just getting measurements between those. And then since NGS publishes known values for the ones that are in their database, you could use those measurements to determine known latitudes and longitudes for the marks you're putting in the ground to do whatever survey you are. So if you're doing a survey that's a mile away from an NGS mark, you would take the measurements from that and with your conventional instruments or GPS, and then transfer those latitudes and longitudes to the site that you have to do your survey of.
That seems straightforward enough.
Yeah, try not to get too far into the weeds. Don't want to put the listeners to sleep.
But one of the questions was why people would want to hunt these, and it's just basically it's a different kind of hide and go seek. There's some challenges, I think, still active, but you can't do them anymore. You can't list them anymore. That did require you to find X number of benchmarks, and for those you had to do the ones that were on geocaching.com. But I've talked with at some of the events people who have actually gone hunting for the railroad markers, and those are the ones that they really enjoy because the database isn't really there for those marks, and they're typically nowhere near where they're reported to have been.
Not sure exactly what the question is there, but there are the term benchmarks, if just back up a little bit, is kind of a global term used by the geocaching community and in the surveying community as well for the discs that are in the ground. But the 5 most common types of discs, you would have horizontal or triangulation disc, which has a known latitude and longitude. So, but that's called a horizontal or control marker or triangulation. Triangulation just because that was the method of establishing it. Then you have the true benchmark, and benchmark is 2 words. The people at NGS will, say it's benchmark, 2 words, and that has a known elevation above sea level. That it's 100 feet. It won't have latitude and longitude, but it will have that elevation. And then there's reference marks, azimuth marks. You're talking about church steeples. They're called intersection stations. But when you mention a railroad, lots of times they are benchmarks that are along the railroad. So it's a mark that has an elevation above sea level, but there's no latitude and longitude. So on geocaching.com, that latitude and longitude, if you look up, I don't know if they have it. I'm afraid to go to the website. I'm going to crash the computer again. But on the data sheet, by the latitude and longitude, it'll say in parenthesis, will have the word scaled. And that may also be on the geocaching webpage. And if you see the word scaled, I think it says either on the geocaching website or I know the data sheet would say it. It says that the scale position is plus or minus 5 seconds. So that's 5 seconds of latitude or 5 seconds of longitude, which each second it depends where you are on the planet, but just say it's 100 feet for each second. So if you have something's plus or minus 5 seconds, you could be 500 feet away. So if that gets to where why these benchmarks along the railroad, if it is a true benchmark, something that has an elevation only, look on the data sheet to see if those coordinates are, they say, scaled or not. Another way is if it's a horizontal point, if you go to the data sheet, the latitude and longitude will be to 5 decimal places. So they'll have, so many seconds will be 10.12345 seconds. So if it shows it to 5 seconds, then it's a horizontal mark. But if it's anything less, then it's, they just scaled it off of some quad map from, 1940 or something like that.
So yeah, it's its own thing that's going to take a lot of effort to really get into, and I have nowhere near enough expertise on it, which is why we have you on the show, because you know this stuff really well. But getting back to logging it, the only way to log on geocaching.com at this point is to actually go back to that geocaching.com/mark, look up the I'm going to call them waypoints because I don't remember what they're actually called, but the number that they're assigned, and log it that way.
PID, so permanent identifier. PID. So it's 2 alpha characters and 4 numeric. So if you know the PID or PID, you can put it in that way. And one thing that we were talking about, I think you might connect before I was so rudely left the scene a little while ago, that you're talking about apps that show them that NGS has a new website. I think it's called Data Explorer. If you go to their website, and I'm afraid to touch a computer so it doesn't die again. But there will be something that says find a benchmark or find benchmarks. And it is a map. So you can zoom in and pan around anywhere you want on the country. And again, it's for a computer. It's not, it's not, mobile friendly, but you can use the NGS's website to actually find the marks instead of relying on an app, because before they didn't have a graphic interface to it. You could do it by county or state, different parts of the country. Say, okay, I'm in, Washington County in, Illinois or something like that. And you could do searches that way. But there is I think it's called Data Explorer or something like that. It's in the upper right-hand corner when you get to their page, but you'll see a map that you can click on it.
Yeah, it is the NGS Data Explorer is the actual name of the website.
Right.
But it is desktop oriented from what I can tell. It doesn't look
right. So if you could bring that up on your smartphone, then you would have something that would show you, but it won't tie into your location, so you just have to know where you are. You couldn't use a location in your phone to get you to that point. That's a much more user-friendly interface than the old just, okay, I got to put in the PID or I got to put in the county and state or something like that.
Right, and you can do a search by zip code over at the left side if you want to zoom in that way and find the marks there.
Okay, you can. Okay, I'll trust you because you're looking at it.
Yeah. I'm looking at it now, and there's not a whole lot of marks over here like I was expecting there to be. Right near me, I actually don't have anything really aside from a couple at the airport. I have what is this? According to the legend, we have a GPS and approximate height and a GPS and vertical control at the airport, and then another GPS and approximate height at the intersection near the airport. But that's all I have within probably about a mile of me.
You have to move to a more benchmark friendly area.
Yeah. Well, and a little over a mile was this one that I tried finding the very first time, which is a vertical control that had been destroyed.
Right. And did you report that it was destroyed to the NGS, or you just saw that on the?
Well, someone else had reported that,
Okay.
and it took me a while to figure out what that had meant.
Yeah, and NGS, it's interesting on the gc.com or geocaching that you can mark it destroyed when you can't find it, and whatever the conditions are, you're sure it was gone, and there's a little warning that window that pops up. Are you sure you're going to put this destroyed? Yes, no. That's about it. Well, if you're going to report something destroyed on NGS, it's a lot more involved. They either want the physical disc returned to them, a digital picture of it in your hand or something like that. Otherwise, they just say it's not found. Well, you didn't find it. But even though you can look there, this was supposed to be in a field, and right now it's in the middle of a 6-lane highway. It's like they won't say it's destroyed unless they have the physical mark.
Right. Well, because it might not be totally destroyed. It could be buried.
Right. Because you mentioned that, because a lot of the older stations, like when they were in the 30s and 40s, there's a subsurface mark, mainly for the horizontal mark. They didn't do it for the vertical ones, but the horizontal mark, it was maybe about 3-4 foot down. There's a disc, and then they put sand over top of that. There's a thin layer of sand. Then they pour more concrete, and then there's another one on top. Because you read some of the descriptions for the older ones, that when the NGS was looking for them, they'll say that the surface mark was destroyed, but they found the other one, and then from that they can reset it. So they haven't done that probably in the 60s or 70s or sooner. It's just the surface mark. But back in the olden days, I guess when you had more labor and it was cheap, they would put a subsurface mark, I guess mainly because it was a lot more difficult to establish then, because you had to put these bilby towers, which was tying into this geo trail that the Maryland Society of Surveyors, that I'm a part of, that we're doing across the state of Maryland. But in order to put up erect a bilby tower and all the observations that were needed, that having that subsurface mark was sort of like a backup, that if the top one got knocked out, it was relatively easy to replace it because you had the subsurface mark to as a backup.
Well, here's what I have for the history on that. According to the data sheet, in 1934, it was monumented, reported by MIGS. In 1952, mark not found by CGS.
That's Coast and Geodetic Survey.
That's kind of what I figured. And then in 1997, and this one we actually have more detail, it's February 23rd, mark not found by USPS QD.
Does it have a...
It's the U.S. Post Office quick delivery.
That's it.
And then in 2001, on March 31st, it was reported not found by NGS.
Okay, I'm going to chance it here. I'm going to go to the website so I can look at it. I'm on a different computer now.
I know, I'm giving you a hard time. As I'm looking through the benchmarks near me, I'm amazed how many of them are, flagpoles, church spires, towers. And I'm looking at this going, this might be fun during the winter months because you could basically do a drive-by. Yeah, there it is. I can see that point. I can take a picture of it, and I don't have to get out of the car, as on a windy and rainy day like today, that would allow me to go out and keep my geocaching navigation skills sharp.
If only they would count as fines on geocaching.com, though.
Just your first one.
Yeah, well, they do count as fines, but they don't count it for your total. So if you look on your your home page, it shows you how many of traditional multis and puzzle caches. Down the bottom it says benchmarks, but they're not included in the total.
Yeah, so you can't keep your streak alive by benchmarking.
That is correct.
I see several pictures in the logs, but pictures are not required.
On the NGS page?
No, on the geocaching.com.
Correct. Yeah. Geocaching does allow you to put photographs on. It's a lot easier to do it there. Well, I guess now it's easier with that program DS World, but even that is not as user friendly as geocaching.com. But having the pictures, is helpful. Like I said, that Dave D, he's a geocacher as well. I think he's got maybe one find, if any, but he has a lot of benchmarks. But he actually goes and takes those pictures, and that was part of what this trail that we're putting together is the different marks. Like you have a horizontal mark that I mentioned that has an own latitude and longitude. Every horizontal mark, not every, but most of the older ones, and I'll say that's up until the 60s or 70s, that there were reference marks. Again, if the surface mark was destroyed, they had a real precise distance to like 2 or 3 reference marks. I'll say, okay, this one is 23 feet away, and this one is 32 feet away. And there's an actual distance right to like the 1/8 of an inch of how far away you have to measure to get to that horizontal mark. But if you look at the disc, and I don't know if you have pictures you can pull up, but they usually have an arrow on it, and it'll say reference mark. The actual word reference mark is right on it. The triangulation station or a horizontal mark will have the word triangulation station or horizontal mark, even if they're all the same station. So let's say the station name is called Seahawks, because I see that in your wall back there. So the station is called Seahawks. Go Seahawks. Well, go Ravens, or Ravens too. But the Seahawks will have that. They'll say Seahawks in 1962. Whenever the disc was, that'll be stamped on it, similar to the picture that you had. But the reference marks will say Seahawks RM1 or Seahawks RM2. So it'll let you know whether it's the first reference mark, second reference mark, or third one. And the reason, getting back to the pictures on geocaching.com, and you have to be a little careful, I'll go to a mark and it's called Seahawks, and then they'll say, oh, look, I found Seahawks. And you look at the pictures and it says Seahawks RM1 is the disc. So it's like they were in the general area, but they didn't actually find the horizontal station. They were finding one of the reference marks to it.
So kind of like a red herring.
Right. Now, the reference marks are close by. They're usually within 100 feet or less. They also would have an azimuth mark, which would also have an arrow. And again, it's stamped on it. It'll say azimuth mark. So, it's right on there. But it would say Seahawks azimuth mark. But they're usually 1,000 feet away or further. So you're really not going to trip over those as easily when you're looking for, the main station. That'll be quite a distance away.
Okay.
Interesting. Well, why don't we get to the trail that you guys are working on, just in case we run out of time here, because we are almost at the 40-minute mark. Tell us what's going on with that geocaching trail.
Well, the geocaching trail has been slow coming, but we're really moving along now. And the plan or the purpose of the trail is to, as I was talking here, is to identify the different type of marks that they are. They're not all benchmarks. It's like not all benchmarks are created equal. So you have a horizontal mark that I mentioned with their latitude and longitude. The benchmark itself has a known elevation above sea level. Reference marks, which may or may not wind up being a horizontal benchmark. Sometimes they wind up getting incorporated into the horizontal or vertical networks. Azimuth marks, again, they don't have, but occasionally they get in. And special marks, which will put the lumps, like church steeples and things like that. So the trail is to introduce the geocachers to the different types of marks. So what we're going to have across the state of Maryland, there's going to be, right now, there's 20 caches planned that will cover the state. There's going to be 4 of each type. Because there's 5. So you have 4 horizontal marks. You'll have 4 benchmarks, 4 reference marks, 4 of each of the series spread across the state of Maryland, and you have to find it. And the coordinates will be for the actual disc itself. If it's a benchmark, we're going to have a good coordinate for it. It's not going to be 500 feet off, So when we publish the thing, we would have located that. So we'll have, here's the mark for it. And if you find 3 of each, and then there'll be a code word, sort of like most trails, that once you get to the disc, there will be a cache right there, or will be some information to tell you where the cache is that's hidden nearby, because the disc might not be in an area that's suitable to hide a cache. If you find 3 of each, there'll be a geocoin. And if you find all 20 of them, then we have a special coin that National Geodetic Survey, which is part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, otherwise known as NOAA, NOAA. So NOAA has given us a bunch of coins that they had made. So we don't have as many of those. So they'll just be for the first people that, do every one. But in order to get one of our coins, that you'll need to find at least 3 of each type, which would be a total of 15.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun, and there's some swag to motivate people to do it. So for those asking why you might want to benchmark, well, now you've got a good reason to go and do that.
Right. And we're trying to pick,
Maryland.
We're picking nice spots around the state. So, you can have some of these benchmarks that you're riding down, the interstate, and here it is, like 50 feet off the road. Okay, we're not going to have one right off of, I-70 or something like that. But we're trying to pick spots that are scenic. Some of them are historic, like a train station where there might be a vertical mark that's actually stuck in the face of a wall. So it's not flat on the ground, that it's actually placed vertically, on the side of a wall. And that the only way that you would have, that would just be an elevation mark. There's no way you could set an instrument over that. But they're all interesting because people think they're all flat on the ground, but you do have them put in faces of buildings too.
Yeah, and not just buildings, but on walls. And there was one that was on the water treatment plant. Actually, there's just a couple on the water treatment plant in Port Huron, I recall very well. GSM times 2 is asking, though, if all the coins are trackable.
What, or the geo coins?
Yeah, the geo coins that you were talking about, and
Yes.
I'm assuming the NGS ones that they gave you are not, though.
Nope, they are.
Oh, they are trackable. Oh,
yes, the ones that the MSS, Maryland Society of Surveyors, ones that we have, they're all trackable. And the NOAA coins, they're micro, they're smaller, but they're all trackable as well.
Oh, nice.
So you can get 2 trackables if you do all 20 caches.
So there you go, GSM times 2. You're going to have to make the trip out to Maryland when that launches. And when is the expected window that might go live?
Our goal is summer 19, so about 6 months. Where there's 4 of us that are the main core of the committee that have all given like 1/4 of the state. So when everybody, February 1st is our deadline to have, everybody have their 5 sites picked. And then then we're going to start, is this going to be a traditional? Do we have to do a multi here? Is this going to be a puzzle? How we're going to set it up, at that point. So our goal is to get this launched by the middle of 19.
Yeah, so no one can go and book tickets yet.
Right.
Look for it popping up about that point.
Right.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun. But we are getting pretty close to the end of the time for this evening. Is there anything that you could suggest for the people who haven't done a benchmark yet at all to get them started?
If you're interested in finding them, they're just a lot of fun, but you'll find them if you're hiking or if you like going outdoors, high points. So if you're going like at some national park and you're way on this overlook, you can see, look, man, I can see across the valley. I can see across the Grand Canyon, wherever this is. If you're at the highest point of a hill or mountain, and it's usually a state park, start looking around. You might find one in a boulder. Lots of times on those are actually, there's a drill hole in a boulder, and I'll set it there because of course I'm working with them, so I see them all the time. Oh, there's one there, and you almost trip over them. If you're doing any rail trails, like old railroads that they turn into biking, hiking trails, there's usually a lot of them along those trails as well, because it was a flat grade and it was easy to do leveling along that. So, when you get to an overpass that you're going across there, and here's a bridge, so you see this big bridge. It's crossed, where it used to be the railroad crossed it. Look at the abutment walls. Look at those walls that as you're going across the bridge, and lots of times there's discs there as well.
Yeah, it's amazing at how much you're just kind of tripping over them.
Right.
When you get there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's several times I'm going out for, looking for a cache, and I'm looking down at my phone and realize, wait, that's a benchmark right there. I just walked over.
Right.
Snap a picture of it and come back later.
Yeah, really. Once you start finding them, you do tend to trip over them. It's one of those, you never knew they were there, and then all of a sudden you start spotting them, and it's kind of what a lot of people like about geocaching. Even if you don't go and log them, like I mentioned, a lot of the ones that I've run across aren't in the database at geocaching.com because they're part of the International Border Commission or whatever they called it. And those were just cool to find. And in some cases, they were actually part of a virtual or an Earth cache.
Right. But you're right, because they do, once you see a few of them, and again, being a land surveyor and I'm dealing with them, they just catch my eye all the time because I've been looking for them. But once, as you mentioned, you found a few, then you start noticing them. I got 3 kids and they're all grown now, but now to the point, it's like when we're on vacation and I'll point one out, hey kids, look, here's a benchmark right here. And it's like, yeah, dad. So another one. But my one son had a trip to Turkey, and he was in Turkey, and then he sent me a picture back of a benchmark he found in the sidewalk in Turkey. And it was just, here it must have stuck. So here he is halfway around the world and sending me a picture of a benchmark he found in Turkey.
That's funny.
GSM times 2 is asking if we can talk about witness posts, and is that actually what they're called?
The witness post, that's the correct name. A witness post is just it's just that it's a piece of angle iron with a sign on it that says witness. And that's usually because the marks are flush with the ground, that if they get grass or leaf litter or something like that covers them up, they're hard to find, unless you know right where it is, or you find some of the reference marks or some of the descriptions say they're so far from trees to kind of get you to it. The witness post, you see that, it's like, okay, it's within a couple feet of it. You just start clearing the leaf litter away or kicking with your foot, and you can usually find it. But they don't, since they were put in the ground the same time as the other, that most of those have rotted away and things like that. But we do find a few, so they're just neat to see that they still exist in some places.
I don't think I've ever seen one.
Well, the place that I've seen them is along the interstate. And once I found one, I was noticing they're all over the place. So you can actually drive by, and you see up here, at least, they have those paddle markers with the orange witness post signs bolted on them.
Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking of the traditional witness post that has a sign that says witness, but you're right. Now they put a lot of these, these orange carcinite posts, it's maybe about half-inch wide and 2 inches, or half-inch thick and 2 inches wide. They go in and it'll just say, I think they say witness 1 or 2, but you're right. Yeah, I forgot about those. I'm just thinking about the old metal ones that were put in the old days, because we still have, where I work, we have the carcinite ones that we put in every once in a while.
Oh, now that I see a picture of one, yeah, I've seen a lot of these. I never looked at them closely. I assumed it was a gas line or electric line, something buried under there that these were marking.
Right. So that'll be real close to it. It's probably within a foot or two of that post. So if you just start looking around the ground, that'll be it. And again, just because if that wasn't there and you knew that there was a benchmark in that area, it could take you forever to find it. So that's just to get you to it real quick.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. No, I never knew what they were. I guess I didn't pay that close of attention. I remember seeing them as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was a kid. What did I care?
Yeah. But you don't have to put them in. So, they're not all over the place. But when you see them, you're going to be real close to one.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And we'll have to get you back on probably after the trail goes live. Give you a little bit of time to get that finished up first.
And also get a new computer.
Well, we may not argue with that.
That's right.
Hey, thank you so much for taking the time this evening to join us. I mean, this is all good information.
Oh, thanks for asking me back again. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Now, next week, we're going to have R. Reagan on the show, and we're going to talk about preserving heirloom caches. It could be a heirloom cache if it's misspelled, but I'm pretty sure it's heirloom, like the tomatoes. but that's not what we're talking about. And January 3rd, we're doing a randomized show. That's one of my favorite ones. Come back for randomized 27. Had to do math in my head, and that's never a good thing. Until then, make sure you check the Cachamaniacs website at cachamaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing GeoGearHeads at cachamaniacs.com or through the many channels of social media. Your support helps keep the Cachamaniac shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachamaniac shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. The show's copyright 2018 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.